All right, I'm going to call this meeting to order at 1:01. Um, First item on the agenda is to approve the minutes. I just sent them around earlier. I hope you had a chance to look at them. Anyone have any comments about the minutes? Okay, and Matt, I'll send you. I know there's a couple other earlier minutes I need to get to you, so I'll send those to you after the meeting. Next item is the Director of Public Works update. So go ahead, Ed.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman. We have full staff, fortunately, so we're working steadily forward, making progress with our field and playground maintenance. However, we are backlogged on several capital projects, the baseball netting, EV stations, and a couple other items because of manufacturing slowdown. So we're waiting on those to, those materials to arrive. Internally, we have some vehicle maintenance that we're performing. We also have some backflow prevention measures that we're taking in the municipal building as well as the library. So we're making steady progress, but we are running into the same manufacturing slowdown, trying to buy wood materials and other things that we need to perform our duties. But we're making steady progress forward. I have not received any word of repairs or necessary needs from the Parks and Rec Commission. So we're hoping to get that before the weather turns. So we're looking to do that soon. We are continuing to do the street sweeping project throughout the borough. That helps with keeping our storm drains clear, as well as providing positive aesthetics around the community.
So what is the backflow prevention project? I don't remember hearing that discussed before.
It's for the fire suppression systems. Every water valve that comes into a municipal building has to have a backflow prevention so that water does not go back into the external system, so that those need to be operating at full capacity.
All right. Are you going to have? I know you were asked to give us some details about the van purchase that's on the capital budget. Are you going to bring that to FNA in 2 weeks, or?
Yes, I have the data available. Well, the baseline of data available. So yes, I have that prepared.
Okay, great. I guess the other question is the road repair on Conway. Where do we stand on that project?
Well, that was a complex issue because we're hoping to gain an easement on the property of 415 Conway Avenue. We need the property owners to agree to that so that we can then gain access onto their property to make those repairs. We do not see extensive repairs into the property themselves, but in order to do it properly, we need to have those property owners sign off on the easement portion of that.
Okay.
But until we get those easement issues resolved, we can't gain access, and therefore the Conway Avenue itself, repairs are really that would be redundant to pave that over and then rip it back up to make those repairs. There's a 18-inch storm drain line that runs from the rear of 410 Dudley along the property line of 415 Conway out to the Conway main. We've made sure that the main along Conway from Sabine to Price is clear. But we don't want to waste money by paving it and then having to rip it up to make those connections for those repairs.
All right, so you're waiting on this easement agreement to be signed.
Yes, and that should
Okay.
happen within next few days,
Okay.
hopefully.
All right. Any other questions for Ed? All right. Thanks, Ed.
Thank you.
I don't know why I muted myself. So on our agenda, we don't have any potential action items listed, but I would like to talk about the stormwater management threshold as something that we potentially might be bringing to council for an action item. So this is something that's come up it came up at the Borough Council business meeting where we had the complaint from the homeowner that a new house that had gone up didn't go through the stormwater management process, and the stormwater system, the runoff was improperly managed, and they're working on it, but things were not properly put into place with the new construction. And Eric Johnson had suggested that the threshold for triggering a borough stormwater review might be lowered, that it was common in other municipalities to have a lower threshold for stormwater review from the borough. So I thought we could talk about that and try to figure out, and in the context of all this flooding, that this was something that we had control over that might help mitigate the stormwater impact on the borough. So Eric, why don't you outline what the email that you sent me about what other municipalities tend to do, or what in your experience other municipalities have, and what we have.
Yeah, so kind of as you're alluding to, the threshold in the borough stormwater code is 2,000 square feet of new or replacement impervious coverage. And that's cumulative on the property from the time this ordinance was adopted in the mid 2000s. If you have someone come in, and this house we're talking about on Dudley, they tore down the house and they put up a new house, and that totaled about 1,700 square feet, 17 or 1,800 square feet of impervious coverage, which falls under the exemption from having to provide the infiltration and rate reduction requirements of the code. It doesn't negate that you can't negatively damage surrounding properties, and I think that problem is being addressed. I think they're voluntarily working together, and that hopefully pans out. But they were not required to put in to do stormwater calculations and put in stormwater basins. So in a lot of other places, they do operate on a lower threshold, and it's a two-tiered system. At 1,000 square feet of new impervious coverage, they require the full stormwater management calculations and stormwater system. And then if you're between 499 or 500 square feet and 1,000 square feet, there's a simplified method, which that is really designed to capture the new patio, the new driveway type of scenario, not the replacement necessarily of an existing driveway, but a new one or an expansion, just an increase in impervious coverage on the property. And that's usually handled through a simplified method, which is kind of a formulaic. You're going to put in 800 square feet of patio. You need to provide this much storage, and you can do it with this big of a rain barrel. You could do it with this big of a stone pit. And it just makes it easier for, let's say, a homeowner to operate and to actually comply with it. Now, to do this, you are creating additional permitting for the borough. The borough is going to have to accept all of these permits, manage the permits. Then my office would have to review them for compliance and issue review memos or letters to the borough and the applicant. So that comes with additional burden on the borough, and it also comes with additional expense on the homeowners. One, the permits usually, in other places, they're a couple $100 all in because you have to factor in the review time of them. And then it also costs money to install the system on your property. For example, I live in a township that has these thresholds, and I put in widened driveway, a new patio, put me into the threshold. I think it cost me a few $100s to permit, and it cost me about $500 or $600 to put in some stone basins in my yard. So something to consider. The upside is you do get more stormwater management throughout the borough, and it's kind of done as things are being developed in the borough. So over time, it does have a cumulative effect, but you have to weigh that against the other impacts, costs, and administrative.
So for the homeowner, would you say that this might add 10% to the cost of the project between the permits and the stormwater installations?
Well, I mean, it depends. If you,
I don't know what
if you're looking at a development like a new house, then it's not. It can be. It's factored in pretty. It might not be as big of a portion because it's that they're already going through a review of their property anyway, just to build the house. This would just be an additional tack on to it, so that would not be as big of an effect. Your biggest impact is going to be that you don't have now. It's going to be homeowners putting in new patios and that type of improvements on the property that right now is not going to require any type. So it's going to add a significant amount of costs.
Wait, I have a question, Eric. If somebody comes in for a permit to put in a new patio, we do require them to show that they're under the maximum impervious coverage, right? So somebody needs to have measured the impervious coverage existing and with the improvement on the property. That already has to happen to get a permit, correct?
Right, yes.
Okay. So they're getting a permit, they're having to measure impervious existing and the increase from the project.
Mhm.
So what is the additional administrative burden?
So they would then, so that's a permit they're going to put in a patio, but now, and that would be handled through like the borough office and through the building code inspector and zoning officer doing their normal permit application. If you add a stormwater application to it, that's now going to come to me to review for compliance with that the stormwater system they're putting in complies with the code and is going to function properly.
Okay, thanks. So it's got it. I guess I may as well ask this now because I'm going to ask you a question because so this is something that is just a question I've had before. So this just brings it to mind. Interestingly, I see here on the example you give from Swarthmore, they permit you to use rain barrels for BMPs, whereas we were flat out told that is not a permissible BMP. In Narberth, I was told you can get no credit for rain barrels. Nice try. But anyway, I'm just saying. But so do we allow rain barrels? Or I mean, in other words, they said like because they're not permanent enough. I think that's what I said. They're not permanent enough. People can sort of move them around, and that sort of leads into my question about okay, so if we allow people to put a BMP in place like that's either requires ongoing maintenance, right? Because it's on the surface, it's a swale, or a bioswale or something, or it's a rain barrel which needs to be emptied and cleaned, or kept hooked up to the downspout, versus a more of an underground, I don't know, a cistern or something that probably still requires some kind of routine maintenance. I don't know. I guess the question is, what does that create in terms of a need to follow up to ensure that the BMPs are kept in place and that they're properly maintained? Because that seems like an even bigger burden. And I wonder how you've seen other municipalities and how you've handled that in other.
So generally, for these smaller systems on residential properties, we know they're there because we have the permits, so we know they're on the property. But like in my case, when I put them on my property and got my permit, I had to sign an agreement that I will maintain the system in accordance with the borough or the township codes. So it puts the onus on the owner to maintain it in perpetuity on the property. Do we, as a matter of course, do we go around inspecting them on a regular basis? No, just because of logistics of that. But they are become part of the improvements of the property that run with the property.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and it should be filed. By the way, whatever. And it should be filed, right? So that it's actually part of the
Right.
anybody. It's like a covenant of some form, right? That's how
Right.
you fashion them. Okay. Thanks.
Maybe it could be inspected upon sale of the property. That's already when we do other code inspections.
I mean, that is something that could you
Incorporate
could think of, yeah.
I mean, so Sean, if we were to let's say we were to so Swarthmore's policy, which I think is others, is that between 500 and 1,000, you have this streamlined procedure, and 1,000 square feet to 2,000, or 1,000 square feet and up, I guess it is what we have for 2,000 and up. How much of an administrative burden would that put on you guys in the office? Is that a reasonable thing to do in your opinion, or is it just going to bog you down in a lot of permits?
The administration of that, the critical task for the administration persons in the office would be to properly identify the applications when they come in, and to make sure that they are being identified when they go to the building code official and flagged for a stormwater review. I think the administrative burden here is mostly going to be on the applicant in terms of greater costs, and both in terms of the permit and, like Eric mentioned, putting the facility in. It's not going to slow anything down because we still would have the UCC mandated permit review time. But you're going to capture a lot more projects. And I would think administratively too, where I also see a potential issue that could add burden. Maybe Eric could comment on this one, is what if you run into a case where someone is, they're doing 1,500 square feet of replacement driveway. And let's say that's an activity we want to regulate. So anyone repaving their driveway is going to have to, that's a pretty sizable driveway, but anyone persons repaving driveway run the risk, or or might have to create some stormwater facility to manage their stormwater. What happens when that's not feasible on the site? And who makes that determination? And is it something we can handle outside of an appeals process? Because if we keep sending everybody to an appeals process, then then administratively you're talking about the ice. You're adding scoops of ice cream. You're talking about you're getting pretty big. So I'd like if it's going to be a light touch and lightweight, I'd like there to be a administrative way to get relief if possible. And then that creates the issue of, well, are people going to always go the relief route with their application? So I don't know much about the day-to-day management and outcomes over a long period of time of this kind of work. Speaking of administrative burden, I would very much like to track this too. Stormwater facilities that get installed on private property do treat and detain and improve water quality. So we should get some credit in the bank, so to speak, not financial bank, but in the pollution reduction bank for these kinds of interventions. So those are more conversations to have with Eric's leadership and knowledge, or I don't know what you think about those ideas right now, Eric.
The only thing I would say, so they're usually for resurfacing existing driveway, that usually does not fall under the new. I think it's even written into the Swarthmore code and some other ones, where if you have an existing parking lot and you're just maintaining it, they generally do not use that, throw you into the threshold of needing to do stormwater just to maintain existing. If you're expanding it, yes. You're ripping it all the way out and restarting again, yes. But just maintaining it, no. So you do at least cut off. There's not that, impact. As far as recording them, yeah, I mean that's easy enough to do if you have the permits for them. Where they'll all come in, we'll know where they are and how big they are. Now I can say that an individual lot is going to be it's a small. Each lot's small, but if you have enough, eventually they add up. So you just keep logging them and see where you end up.
Eric, have you been a part of any appeals to this?
Not really. So, not really. Because usually with the tools they're given when you're adding a patio or when you're doing a larger development, such as a new house, and you have to that puts you over the threshold for needing a full stormwater. In that code, there already is here's what you have to meet unless you can't do it for this reason, then here's a standard you have to meet. There is a procedure so where you can get the best outcome, and eventually sometimes there is relief needed, such as 100 Forest, or they needed some relief ultimately, but that's part of a larger land development project anyway, so that's all in the process. On a smaller, when you're talking about like a homeowner on a property, there's usually, it's not that big of a volume of water they have to deal with, and there's usually some method that there's something they can do. And really kind of, it comes down to what's the best thing we can do on the property. Or if you really don't have room for this, you can't do that. Okay, well, can we make sure we're putting the water over a grass area or into a rain garden or something that can be done to meet the intent of the ordinance.
So you're saying the road to compliance for the simplified method could be a route of very low tech solutions that
right.
Maybe you don't get the exact water quality volume treated, but you get something that's better, like disconnected runoff.
Right. So like what's our intent now? We have a house that they just have downspouts discharging towards hitting the driveway and running out to the street real quick. Okay, well, how about we take that downspout and put it towards the garden area, or like you can work something out usually. That's figuring out what we want to be doing.
Yeah. Simple interventions like
right.
Like some grading that goes down slope to capture some.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like we could reach some sort of compromise agreement with homeowners if we decided they could not implement the recommended solutions, we can come up with something else.
Right. So like the larger projects, when you're over the higher number, that gets into, you need engineering anyway. So there's a whole procedure for that. These smaller ones, we can work with the homeowner and we just make it work. Now, a lot of times there is a lot of direct working with them because they're not sure what they're doing. So you kind of just say, okay, you do this, here's this, do this.
Eric, you're saying that the cutoff between a smaller and larger project is 1,000 square feet. Is that right?
So you're using like the Swarthmore or some other places. Their threshold is 1,000 square feet instead of 2,000 square feet.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I would like to be able to capture this kind of house project. I mean, that was probably the original intent, but some people do live in smaller houses.
So just to be clear, so we're talking about 1,000 feet of added impervious, or 1,000 feet of earth disturbance, or?
Yeah, so the way your code currently is written is 2,000 square feet of new or replacement impervious coverage, or 5,000 square feet of earth disturbance.
Oh, right. Okay.
So in the case of the house in Dudley, it was about 1,800 square feet of new impervious, and the entire lot is less than 5,000 square feet.
Right.
So
I think we have a couple options. One would be to simply lower our threshold to 1,000, which would capture
Okay.
the big stuff, it would capture all the houses for sure. I mean,
Mhm.
unless someone's putting a tiny house in their backyard or something.
Right.
And then another option would be to have an even, a lower number that would capture things like patios and, new driveways, the 500 to 1,000 level.
Right.
That's Swarthmore has. So Michelle and Rob, why don't you tell me what your thinking is here? Whether hopefully we can come to some sort of recommendation as a committee.
Yeah, I would support it. I mean, I guess I think what I'm hearing is that once you get to 1,000 square feet of new impervious surface, you have to kind of work with an engineer to design a remediation system, right?
Right. Mhm.
So I mean,
That's where you need to do all the calculations for the 100-year storm, 25 years. So it's a very we had to do this, so it's a lot.
Correct.
Of work. So
okay.
you're saying 1,000, maybe trigger that at 1,000 feet of new or replacement, but consider a simplified process for some interval between 1,000 and 500.
I mean, I guess maybe a third option is maybe 2,000 square feet does trigger needing full engineering, and maybe you have a simplified method under 2,000 square feet. That way, you're not necessarily requiring a homeowner or somebody. You're not bringing an engineer in at a lower threshold. You're still getting stormwater management.
Can we give this some thought rather than trying to? I mean, I just saw this today. I haven't really thought about it. I'd like to really give this a little more thought rather than just picking numbers out of the air.
Okay.
All right. I don't feel prepared to say right now
Right.
what makes the most sense. I mean, this is really helpful to have this. Thank you, Eric, because software I think is, well, I don't know. I don't know, but I mean, I think it's helpful to look and see how other very more built out areas that have lot sizes like ours have dealt with it, who visited this issue recently. I definitely think whatever it is, we should do something. I think that we want to bring smaller projects in some capacity to have them doing at least something to manage stormwater a little bit better. What we're doing right now. But yeah, I am. My instinct is kind of similar to what I think yours might be, Fred, which is that, triggering a full engineering review at 1,000 square feet might be a little heavy-handed. I don't know.
I mean, I think
just want to think about it.
Okay, I think teardowns, any kind of new teardown should have to go through a full review. I think we should set it up so that any kind of, single family house,
Well, maybe that might be your earth disturbance then, because any teardown is going to be basically earth disturbance of the entire lot, right? So if you have maybe you want to set your square feet of earth disturbance to be whatever corresponds to the typical small lot in Narberth instead of being just over the size of a small lot in Narberth, because then you'd bring every teardown within the code, right?
I mean, but I think there is still value if you're putting in a big driveway to covering it. So, all right, let's take this offline. Maybe come back to it next month for exact numbers, or to see if we can figure out some. Take it up again next month. Does that sound okay, Michelle?
Yeah, I think that's great. Is that all right with you,
Okay.
Rob? I mean, if we just noodle on this a little bit.
That's fine.
Okay.
All right. So we will, unless there's any more questions for Eric, while we're here. I think otherwise we'll postpone making a recommendation till next month, or hopefully we'll be able to make a recommendation next month. Okay. Next item on the agenda is the capital plan and budget. So I feel like there are some major infrastructure components that are not currently reflected on the capital plan and budget. One of which is the potential for sort of complete streets, sidewalk, and street improvements alongside the paving. I know Sean had penciled in just a number I'd thrown out, but I think that for future, I know we agreed as a council that we were going to hold off on street paving until we did a proper analysis of the pipes, the sewer and stormwater pipes. But when we do get back to the paving, that's an expense that I'd like to have reflected. The PRP is not reflected on the capital plan, and there's no Parks and Recreation spending on the capital plan. So I guess let's start with the PRP, because that's sort of a conceptual thing. So we have a PRP. It's hopefully going to get approved. I mean, it seems like the approval is very likely, and it has significant amounts of spending on it. I don't actually remember the exact amount, but like upwards of $1 million in spending. Is that right, Eric?
I don't know if it was quite that high, but it's several $100,000. Yeah.
Okay. So we've got several $100,000 worth of spending. I think we're not exactly sure how much the cost of some of these bump outs is going to be, so we don't really have precise numbers for the spending. But I guess the question is the capital planning supposed to reflect sort of broad generalities, or is it supposed to reflect, we know we have this liability on the books. We have to build these under law. Do we need to put that on the PRP or on the capital plan as sort of a planning number, or should we just wait until we have more exact sums and a better timeline for the projects? So Sean, why don't you give your opinion here?
Sorry, you're muted.
It's
Okay.
important to have money authorized in the 2021 capital plan cycle to pay for capital stormwater system improvements we know we need to make. These are gray stormwater system improvements, and the PRP is talking about green stormwater system improvements, most of which will be part of our streets. I believe something like 75% of our scheduled improvements are scheduled to take place in our streets. And the numbers in the PRP, I kind of put a general level of certainty on those numbers. You might have a less expensive intervention that could be put in the land the borough owns at Narberth Park. You may have very expensive interventions that would be projects that would be talked about in our streets. So I think there's still a lot of variability in what it's actually going to cost, because we don't know. And we won't know until we pick a site and we know where the utilities are. We know the details of what we want to install. We know at this point, though, we know roughly what the scale of our plan is and how many of these we need to do and how much contributing area we need to grab water off of and treat. And we're going to do that mostly through our streets. We don't know yet how much, what the actual ratio of treatment per dollar looks like until we've done a few of these projects, or it might be something we could get better details on from Eric, but not to put him too much on the spot here. I think that was done in the PRP just in a really generalized fashion. I think Eric might say the same thing, that you really don't know how much a project costs until you know the details of the project. And we found that out when we bid the Green Street stormwater improvements on the edge of Narberth Park, on the north side edge of Narberth Park. And that was, honestly, that was a really limited, if you looked at the contributing area to that series of bioswales that was connected to runoff from the street. When you really looked at that, it wasn't a very big contributing area. Would have been fairly impactful in terms of its visual impact and how it would have changed at least the experience of walking down that sidewalk behind the left field fence on Windsor Avenue. But I think that the low bid on that one was in the mid $300,000, and we were projecting even the engineer's projection for that project before we bid it was 60 to 50 to
80.
half, like half, I think, of that, wasn't it, Michelle?
It was a lot less.
So we were talking a lot at that meeting about the merits, demerits of the project, and everyone sitting at the table knew we weren't going to approve it because it was it just didn't make any financial sense. And so we need to develop those skills and choose better locations that aren't as intertwined and ripe with conflict. And the conflicts comes from parking, neighbors, parks, and it comes mostly from
Just utilities, right?
comes from utilities. Yeah.
Yeah.
We had to put the curb and where things had to go and where things couldn't go, and having to move a fence. And that, as soon as you start talking about hardscaping, right, Eric, you start talking about more money. So we're going to be trying to find as many, we want to develop a way to do this that's lean and low cost. So that's going to be our charge. Your question, Fred, about money, I do think it's important to put money in the capital plan as a commitment by council to work with, and we can continue to work on it. And we can amend the plan if we come up with with more details about what it's actually going to cost to do our first project or our first collection of projects, however that's going to play out next year.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. I mean, I recognize there's a lot of uncertainty in these costs, but the certainty is it's going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars. We're going to have to either take out debt or find grant funding or something to help us deal with this expense. And it's over 5 years, which is the planning period of the capital plan. So yeah, I mean, I'm comfortable with provisional numbers. I'd just like to see something in there to reflect that, just so we can plan better. Michelle, Rob, anything to add about that?
Yeah, I agree. What's the best? Well, what's our time frame? I mean, it's a 5-year period. We're not really sure at this point, I think, when we're going to need to actually construct these facilities, right? Or I don't know. Do we know when we're going to need to have our stormwater compliance in place so that we know what time period we're budgeting over, and what's the best source for provisional numbers?
I mean, the PRP does have numbers, so we can use those as a planning document.
Okay, I think that makes sense.
But I'm not sure about I'm not sure if we can just backload it all and plan to do it in year 4 and 5 or something.
Yeah, the PRP has $675,000 in its provisional funding numbers, and I give that a very high variability.
Yes, that it's a budgeting number, but the level of detail is very estimated.
It doesn't always have to be upwards either. Let's be honest about that. We can think of very, very low tech interventions, and I hope we can do some of that work as well. Just simple above ground features in the park that take the runoff off of the half of the library roof and treat it. That can all be done on the surface with plants and landscape management rather cheaply.
Right, and that's some of the implementations in the plan is that it's landscaping type planning in the library area.
All right, so I think we all kind of agree that there should be some sort of tentative numbers for this included into the capital plan. Let's talk about. So we have a complete streets. I suggested that if we're going to put $100,000 a year toward paving, we should put $30,000 a year toward complete streets. Just as a guess of how much, working on the accessibility of the sidewalks and any street lighting issues or anything that comes up, or crosswalks, anything that comes up while we're working on the street. I don't know that we'll know the exact number until we actually do a paving project and do, if we agree to a complete streets analysis, then we go through it and we figure out how much it actually costs. That would be another placeholder number. What do we think about trying to include that alongside the paving costs, just as a planning number?
Well, I'll add my 2 cents that I think it's feasible just from a number shuffling around perspective, because there are some other cuts that have been recommended by members of council. So I think it would work from a financial perspective.
So Fred, I'm trying to remember from our last meeting, we discussed this kind of doing block by block, right? As we pave, then we do the complete streets and we budget for that. But that includes, so you're saying the 30,000 would include the bike. Does it include the bike infrastructure?
So
I guess what is included?
I think, so I believe that as we pave these streets, we have a commitment to build ADA ramps if they're not there. And I did an informal survey as I've been walking around. I think about maybe 25 to 30% of our intersections. I mean, the downtown is pretty good. Once you get out of the downtown, I think maybe about a third of them would require ADA ramps to some degree. They have nothing basically, or they have like poured asphalt, which is no good. So those are going to be expensive if we do them. And if we have, if we determine we need to do some sort of crosswalk improvements, if we decide we need to put in a street light or something, I mean, these are options. I'm just looking through the checklist. I mean, Elizabethtown has a checklist that they go through every time they pave a street of the, of what is going on around the street and is it safe for pedestrians and bicyclists. So that's where I'm seeing that money being spent for, is just sort of alongside the paving, making sure that the sidewalk and the the crosswalks are safe and accessible. So the bike lane, I think, should be a separate issue, because you can't really plan 2 blocks of bike lane. I mean, that's not as helpful as doing a larger, more holistic design. So I'm hoping that the process we're working on with the DVRPC will let us trial some bike lane ideas, and then we can come up with something else, hopefully to get grant funding for a larger bike lane project. But that's the long answer. The short answer is I don't see the bike lanes as being part of this.
Okay.
This amount per year.
Thank you. That helps. So just one kind of sidewalk related question, because I know Fred, you've been, talking about sidewalk maintenance in general. And I was just curious, I know the burden is on the homeowner, but is there, with Ed here, like, is it possible for our crew to do any of the corners at a lower cost, or are we stuck with that high cost for each curb cut, or whatever it is, ADA ramp?
Well, that's sort of out of the scope or beyond the scope of our capabilities.
Okay.
Because you need to jackhammer it up. It has to be, stone brought in, and then it has to be engineered properly so that it is compliant. So that's slightly beyond our scope of capabilities.
Okay. Yeah. I just wanted to ask, because I know you can do so many things. I can't do any of it. So to me, it's all very impressive, but I didn't know about sidewalks. So, okay.
Michelle, all right, so are you comfortable with like this number being, with us recommending this number to go into capital planning every year? This is to sort of be alongside the road paving.
Yes.
Okay, great. So I will. I'll make that recommendation to Cindy that we include that along with. F&A. So yeah, the idea of a bike lane, I just don't have a good idea of a number to put in. I mean, I think once we have a more information, we can talk about putting that into the capital plan. But I don't think I can come up with a number for that, and I don't think we need to right now, because we're looking at very small scale pop-up projects for now, which are not a significant, a few $1,000s rather than 30,000, 100,000. So I think the budget can handle that, and that'll give us the information to plan out a larger scale project, which we can then budget for. Sound good? All right, and then the final capital plan item was the parks and recreation spending. So right now there's 0 over the 5-year period. I know that they revisited this at their last rec board meeting, which I was unable to attend. I think Krista was unable to attend. Sean, you were there, right? Do you want to, would you tell us what the upshot was of that?
Well, we've re-engaged KCBA architects to finish the work that council authorized in late 2018 to guide the rec board through a planning process for the future of Narberth and Sabine parks. I think that work got to about 85% complete, and then in 2019 it didn't get finished, and the person who was working with KCBA went on to work for a different firm and just kind of fizzled out. So early in 2020, I'd say around April or so, I talked to the chairperson at Rec Board, and we got back together with the architecture firm and asked them first to send us all the data. We got all the data, and we showed some of the images to the Rec Board, and they didn't recognize what they were looking at. So then we realized we had to go back to KCBA and ask for a more hands-on help with getting this project complete, which is why they started working. It's no new engagement. They're just finishing the engagement that they had agreed to in 2018. So at the last meeting of the Rec Board, fast forward to that point, we were going through iterations of the most of the work was done with Narberth Park. That's the bigger, more complex park, obviously. Making sure that the existing site plan was correct, and then working through a progression of ideas that were discussed at the meeting. So now the Rec Board has a really kind of almost a storyboard, you could say, of each thing that they talked about at that meeting for future planning for the park. So it was talking about where the fieldhouse restrooms would be located, how the tennis courts would be used, how certain areas would be connected, where the active recreation spaces would be, and where the passive recreation spaces could take place. And also changes to the circulation pattern in the parking area. So all of those things were discussed, and we have a better almost like a flip book of things, of images that build on the last one to the 9th or 10th image, which composes everything that they talked about. But the Rec Board wasn't in a position to make any recommendation or to really at that point let go and sort of present the ideas all to council. So that's going to take place at their next meeting, and the chairperson will be able to run that meeting. And I think they're pretty close to wrapping up their work with KCBA, and then it'll be up to council to consider those plans and ideas. And if council wants to agree to them, adopt them, then we can make more intelligent choices about investments in PRP, parking lot, and all the other infrastructure that we want to site in Narberth Park. I don't want to site things and spend borough's money and on Eric's services without knowing for sure where some of our fundamental choices are going to be about things like the tennis courts and the field house.
All right, so they are going to come together at their next meeting, and then they're going to come up with a presentation for council where they're asking for specific requests. Okay. So it sounds like we should just hold off on anything and then amend the capital plan as needed based on what happens after this presentation. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that seems easy. Okay. Any other capital items that we want to discuss here? Okay. Next item I have on the agenda is complete streets. We've already kind of talked about this a little bit. I think that if we're going to do this alongside paving, we should codify it in some way. We should figure out exactly how we're going to go about it. We have some time to do this because we're not going to be doing any paving for a while. So I'm going to propose I take this offline and bring back some recommendations for how exactly this process should work at a later meeting. Okay. Sean, is that okay? Sound good with you? I'll talk to you, and maybe we'll bring something back to a later infrastructure meeting sometime before the paving project gets going. Pop-up bike lane. So we had a very productive conversation with DVRPC. They have been reaching out collaborating on a pop-up bike lane. They've been reaching out to the office and reaching out to the cycling club for details on how our planning process had gone and what all the history. Basically, they seem to me very enthusiastic about partnering with us, and I think everybody liked what they heard at that meeting. So I'm very hopeful that this will continue to go well. They had floated a suggestion. So I think we at the meeting we kind of had consensus that at this point in the year it makes more sense to plan to do a bigger pilot project maybe next spring rather than trying to get it done this fall. But they also floated the idea of doing a very small pop-up, like say a few blocks for a weekend or a few blocks for a day in the fall. So I wanted to gauge everybody's sense of well, first of all, Sean, if you have anything to say, you're on the meeting. Matt, you were on the meeting too, right? And Ed, were most of you guys on the meeting? I don't remember if Eric was on the meeting.
Background question. So have we hired DVRCP? I mean, do we have a contract with them for a particular scope of services, or what's our working relationship now?
The working relationship is a simple handshake, friendship, friendship bracelet type relationship where DVRPC has a program where they're investigating. They call it tactical urbanism. That's the buzzword in the planning world, where you go out and you test things out, be it pedestrian intervention, a bike intervention, and you see how it goes. And it's better to be more kinetic about your planning than potential about your planning. Like, let's go out and try something out. And it's a small line item in DVRPC's budget, and it's a new thing, and it's being led by their planners in their office of, help me out here, Matt, pedestrian mobility planning. Is that the right label? So it's their manager and their two planners in that department. I'm going to let Matt talk because that's his world.
Yeah. Office of Transit and Pedestrian Planning. And it's, they have a work program. DVRPC has an annual work program. That's the body of work that DVRPC staff works on throughout the year. There aren't any formal contracts with any of the municipalities or any other governmental entities that they want to work with, but it is included. They have that discretion of who they want to work with, and they've chosen Narberth to work with them. So we are, sounds kind of bad, but we're at the mercy of DVRPC. But they really are collaborative in nature, and we'll get a pretty good overall work product from them.
Great, thank you. No, I wasn't aware of that. It sounds kind of exciting. That's great. I'm glad that's moving forward and we're getting something from it.
If you
As
got
far
any-
as your question about the fall, Fred, and doing a smaller 3-block or whatever you said, a few blocks in the fall. Like, I think that the question would be, what resources would that consume from the borough and our public works, or what would we need to do without sort of knowing that, whether it's feasible. It's hard to answer the question. I mean, I would be like, oh, sure, but it depends. What would it involve on our part? Are they giving us that information? Or are they saying, well, look, you could try this, and then it's up to us to go and cost it out and figure out the investment that would be required, or how is that working?
I mean, I'm sure there'll be another call. I mean, we didn't really get into the details of what it would be like, but I'm pretty sure they would give us some, some suggestions, strong suggestions. They were also, I mean, among the things they were saying they could help out with is sort of data gathering, is that it'd show us, in their opinion, best practices and how to gather data on the effectiveness of this program. So the pop-up would be an opportunity to also implement the data gathering that would be used in a larger pilot project as well. But I mean, they said they have some things. They have some like temporary barriers that they could offer us.
No,
didn't
not
they?
yet.
Okay.
They're working on developing a lending
That's it.
library. Since it's a new program, I can't remember the name they had for it. They have some fancy name for it. They're working on getting some grant funding to develop a lending library for infrastructure things like bollards, temporary bollards, and those sorts of things. But it's so new that they don't have that yet. The other thing I would just caution you about is that, we aren't the only municipality that they're going to be working with this project. And so I would just, caution you to use their time wisely. If you continue to, nickel and dime them throughout the year, it does all add up, and they do have other municipalities that they are working with within a year. I would just, I guess I'm saying, if you want to do both, you might not get a better product if you just say, let's stick with one bigger project, if that makes any sense. Just saying that we aren't the only municipality they're going to be working with. It's a new program. I would like us to manage our expectations with it and really lean on them to help guide us what their best expertise is throughout it.
Thanks.
Before we get too wedded to that part-time or that short-term pop-up park, it might be worthwhile asking them if it would detract from the other goal that we talked about in having a much larger application in the spring.
Did you say they brought that idea up, or we brought that idea?
They did. That's why I'm bringing this up. Is that it was something that they brought it up.
Yeah, and I can't remember if it was in addition to or instead of doing something larger in the spring. So that we might, I guess I'm saying we might need some more clarification from them if they truly did mean that they could do both, or they were just saying that, hey, look, we could also do this thing instead in the fall. It would be shorter term, so on and so forth. So I think we might need some more clarification from them.
That sounds good. I mean, I'm sure there'll be another call soon, so we can see what their intentions were when they made that suggestion.
Fred, I was sorry I couldn't make that meeting, but did you discuss grant possibility? Is that something they are working on too, like figuring out grant?
Well, right now, since we're looking at something very lightweight, I don't think we were talking about grants, just because they would be handling most of the planning for the project. So I think the expenses on the borough's end would be pretty minimal. But I forget whether they said they could help us with grant planning in the longer term if we took that information and moved on. I don't remember if that came up, Sean. Do you remember, Matt?
So, my experience is that the more organizations you have that you're in contact with So now we're connecting with the Regional Metropolitan Planning Organization for Philadelphia. The more connections that you have, it might not be on a formal basis of, hey, we will help you with grants, but the more people who are aware of what you're doing, the more eyes that are looking at it, the probability increases that there will be someone somewhere along the way saying, hey, there's a grant opportunity. You should check this out. So this is a good thing. I don't think it's formally them saying that, yes, we will help you with grants, but anytime those opportunities show up, I do believe that we'll be in the forefront of their thoughts.
Sorry, I'm just, one sec. Just getting Kimberly Bezak, who had a conversation with folks yesterday, is sending me a message. I guess she's watching the meeting. She said the fall pop-up would be to collect data to inform or improve the spring design. So I think they're viewing it as both a fall pop-up and a larger spring project, which sounds good to me. So we'll clarify that though and make sure we're not demanding too much of their time to do this. But because definitely we don't want to strain our relationship when we're getting something we very much want from them. We want to make sure that everyone stays on good terms here. So that's where we stand on that. It sounds like committee likes the idea of potentially moving forward with something in the fall. But yeah, Sean, you never really answered how much of a drain on borough resources it would be.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's going to be, there'll be some cost. There'll have to be a lot of communication up front. There'll be installation hours, and then we shouldn't put something in unless we're going to observe and measure. So there'll be someone who's going to have to do that observation and measurement. So I would hope that we could get some partnership in some of those areas with our partner groups, NCC, NCA. The integration, the communication, the ordering of the materials and delivery and getting all those things in, all the logistic concerns. So I can't put a value, I can't put a number or value on that. It's just something that'll demand some of our attention, mostly Ed's.
Well, anyway, I'm excited about this idea. I'm sorry I wasn't able to make the last meeting either. I will definitely make it a point to be on the next call so that I can learn more and inform myself. But I want to help move this forward in a way that makes the most sense. I think it's a nice opportunity to be sort of on the ground floor and to have an organization that's looking to do this work have identified Narberth as one of the communities they'd like to work with. And I want to make sure we don't lose that opportunity. So I want to make sure we keep moving forward on our end in ways that make sense, as well as just making sure that we're clearly listening to what DVRCP is able to offer and not, as Matt pointed out, sort of losing sight, letting the tail wag the dog. So I'm excited about moving forward.
I mean, I don't want to speak. Yeah, I don't want to speak for the Narberth Cycling Club, but I am. In the past, they've done cycling counts, so this is something that they've done in the. I am. I'm pretty confident that they would be able to work with us on any kind of pop-up project. Or I'm very hopeful. Let's say. Again, I don't want to speak for them. Okay, so this continues, and I'm sure there'll be an update for next month. 201 Sabine planning update. So this is just a quick note that we're having a meeting. A meeting is being held with the near neighbors of the 201 Sabine property, who have been. The near neighbors have been invited already to this meeting. Council members will be at the meeting as well to listen to concerns. This is part of the planning process that our consultant has been managing for us. And then after this meeting, there will be more opportunities for people to have their voices heard. There will be a larger invitation to the general community after this meeting is held. So we're still listening. We are in the middle of this process, and we're about to have our first significant community feedback. Yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to this meeting. I have to make sure I can make it, but it seems it seems like an interesting, it'll be an interesting experience. Sean, anything to add about the planning process?
No, thank you. I think you covered the bases pretty well. The meeting's going to take place next Wednesday. It's an invitation-only RSVP event for the neighbors of the site to understand what sort of impacts, not sort of, but what impacts are most unique to living next to 201 Sabine Avenue. Before we open up the conversation to the larger community and have our public meeting in October, where everyone will be welcome to attend, and we'll get feedback from everyone. I will be following up after this meeting shortly with council. We have a summary memo from our consultant regarding the outreach that was done with our tenants at 201 Sabine Avenue. The 6 tenants of 201 Sabine Avenue were interviewed first. So we're kind of starting narrow and kind of expanding our outreach. We started with the tenants. We're moving on to the invitation-only neighbor event, and then we're going to have a larger community event. All 3 phases are meant to elicit conversation and understand those viewpoints and have that information inform the process going forward. So the first step went pretty well. We're looking forward to next week, and I hope that Michelle, thank you for stepping up. I really appreciate it. I hope that other members of council will be able to join us next week and help us facilitate some of the breakout sessions at that meeting. So thank you in advance if you have the time and will to do it. Thank you.
Is there a date and time for the October meeting? Has that been set yet? Or okay. And I'm sure that'll be.
We're going to do it at a regularly scheduled meeting of council or some other separate meeting, and I have to talk to council president about that.
Okay, and that'll be well publicized when that meeting is scheduled. Okay, it's not on the agenda, but parking study task force. Michelle, any updates there?
Hold on, I had to unmute. No, not really. There's been a lot of interest. We have a lot of applicants. We sent out a survey, or through Michelle Carroll, sent out a survey that I kind of put together with some input from you and Aaron. Sort of catch. So one of the things that we wanted to do was make the task force as representative as possible, as far as around certain metrics relating to if your experience with parking in your living situation. And so we sent out a survey in order to capture some data, and maybe that will help us because we do have a lot of applicants and we need to sort of weed it down. I think we've already decided we're not going to be interviewing, and so we will be making our selection at our next council meeting, which is, I forget the date. It's early October. I don't even have the date right now on me, but applicant, thank you, the 7th. Sean, applications will close at the end of the month. I know at least one other person has told me they're definitely applying. So Sean, at some point, maybe offline, if we could just sit down and just have a brief conversation about where we are with our facilitator, and I'd love to get their input on what they see as the right size, because I think we want to know what size they think would be the best to manage this project, rather than council forcing a committee of I don't know, perhaps too many people or too few. So I'd love to get their thoughts on that before we go into our next meeting. That's all.
Okay. Anything else for us to discuss here? Anybody waiting for public comment, Sean? Okay. Thanks, everybody. Meeting is adjourned.